Well, when we look at the Canadian banking system as it is today, in the event of a crisis, and especially in the event of a liquidity crisis, I think even the regulator starts having to scramble to find tools in order to help the banks cope in that sense. So as part of your stress testing, as part of your scenario planning, do you envisage whether the current regulatory regime is sufficient to deal with that?
Well, I think every system can be challenged. Again, I'm not sure that it is the regulatory toolbox, so to speak. Certainly, central banks play a huge role here in terms of liquidity support in a liquidity crisis, and the Bank of Canada was very active. It has been very active, as all central banks have been. I think that it's really a question of using the tools that you have. Stress testing can take you so far, and I think that every system ought to be stress tested, and people ought to be looking at what could bring a system down. That's a recommendation of the Corrigan report, the Counterparty Risk Management Group report. You really do have to have a deep understanding of your institutions and what could go wrong. But I don't think that that there's a connection with powers. At the end of the day, you can look at how you could wind up an institution, how you could resolve an institution that is involved in many countries, and that is something that the G20 and the Financial Stability Board have put out as an issue that must be looked at. And I do agree that we need to do a lot more there. People don't like to think about those scenarios, but you do really need to think about those in good time so that you're better prepared in the bad.
Across Asia, many of the regulatory regimes are fused. They have broader powers than you have, and they're closer to the political process, so the relationship with government is a lot more interactive, to use a fair word. But when we look at models like yours, where the mandates are very highly defined, we do wonder, what happens in the case of a crisis. How do you read, for example, what happened in the UK and the regulatory response to Northern Rock, to some of the failures that happened, and the criticism that the FSA and the Bank of England should have been in better communication with each other?
I think that's a really important issue. I live in Ottawa. It's a very small town. When the global financial turmoil struck, the governor of the bank, myself, the deputy minister of finance, the head of the Canada Deposit Insurance Corporation, we were meeting every single day. Our offices are within a block of one another. We met every single day for much of August 2007. We continued to meet after that. And so the communication is robust. You have to have really good communication. You cannot take people by surprise. You cannot take the central bank by surprise. You cannot take the government by surprise. So we are independent at OSFI, and I think that is crucial. But you have to have very good communication among all of the players and recognize that we each play an extremely important role, especially in a crisis. So that, I feel, is a strength of the Canadian banking system.
Assuming that there was good communication between the Bank of England and the FSA, what do you think was a failure of that process? Where do you think that went wrong?
It's one thing to have a requirement, as we do in our statute, that we have a committee that must meet on occasion. But you have to have a real commitment and a real appreciation of the value of communication. And I think that it's important. You cannot underestimate the importance of that. So given that I came from the Department of Finance, and given that I was actually involved in the development of OSFI's mandate, so I had a very strong appreciation for the roles of each and why they were important, which helped me, certainly, in the summer of 2007, really appreciating that everybody had to be at the table. And I was certainly benefiting from the advice that I was getting from the central bank and from the government. So we really came together as a team. And so you really have to appreciate the value of that interaction, as opposed to just meet.
Right. Let's get into this topic of compensation and governance as you see it to be. How would you describe the institutions that you regulate in terms of the composition of the board, the transparency levels, and the quality of the board, actually?
Well, I can start off on a positive note. The positive note being that in Canada, the chair of the board and the CEO has been separate for many years, and that is in sharp contrast to the U.S. And many people think that that has been quite positive for governance in Canada. That's the positive note. I do think that we need to look closer at board composition in Canada. You can look at boards around the world, UK, US, Canada. I haven't looked beyond that. And the composition of boards is such that they included a lot of seasoned business executives, but not many people who understand banking and the banking industry and the management of risk. And I think that adding more people like that would deepen board discussions, provided the other directors did not decide they had no more need to probe. So that's something that we're looking at now. In terms of compensation, Canadian compensation for CEOs, I don't think was as high as in some other countries, but we're not really aimed at levels. We're looking at incentives created by compensation schemes. And I keep repeating that because a lot of people hope that regulators deal with levels, but that is not where we should be looking. We should be looking at the incentives to manage risk that is being taken. And that's where we are focused.
Well, do you think that you've made headway in that area?
I think boards are taking compensation a lot more seriously now. The Financial Stability Forum principles on compensation came out only a few months ago, so it's early days. And all regulators that I deal with hope that by next fall there would be a improvement in how institutions design their compensation schemes and how they explain to the world why those schemes are prudent. And so it's too early. I think that by the end of 2009, we'll have a much better assessment of how that's going.
How would you describe Canada's role in the FSB, the Financial Stability Forum, and in the G20 scheme of things to try and come up with a new global architecture for financial services?
Well, some people would say that Canada punches above its weight. We have a small financial sector relative to, say, the UK and the US. But I think that we do have something to offer, and Canada did co-chair along with India the Working Group 1 of the G20, which set out a number of recommendations to improve regulation and supervision. So it's something where I think we do play an important role. I myself get a lot out of the Financial Stability Forum meetings. I find that it is extremely useful to hear the perspectives, and it's particularly good on the system-wide issues, what you're seeing globally, and some of the pressures. So I find it invaluable, and I think that the new members of the Financial Stability Forum will feel the same way.
Good. Thank you very much, Julie Dickson.
Thank you.